Oh man, Outliers, the story of success by Malcolm Gladwell. Whew, guys, this one is something special. It has really opened my mind to a ton of very uber successful people and looking at exactly how they got there and questioning the background of those individuals, and then using that as an inspiration for your future, my future, and looking at, what are the events that have happened and how can you use those to grow your feelings, actions, and results in the future. I mean, this is some crazy next level stuff. The man starts out with like Bill Gates, and he's like, this is, Bill Gates, killer guy, right? But then he goes in and he's like, well, why did this happen, right? And he looks at so many interesting correlations between groups of people. So with Bill Gates, he looked at individuals born, I think it was in like the 1970s, in a very specific, it was like a 4-year, 2-year, 3-year range. And those aged individuals were like the CEOs, the chief executives, the top performers at massive like Sun Microsystems, like the biggest tech companies at the time. And alongside age, he looked specifically at how Bill was one of the an extremely, other really legendary developers at the time. They were very privileged to have access to a computer in college where they could go and actually work on the computer and learn how to code. And it was a very special kind of computer where they could get the results immediately. And since it was such a new time in the internet, they were very fortunate to have actually unlimited access to them in college. And that's how they turned into like the coders of the internet, the creators of, HTTP, like the founders of current technology. So they looked at Bill Gates, and the man had a computer in like high school, so he was in a private school, and they look at how the community around him and the background around him came with wealth and donations to really bring in that computer room, and then giving him the great fortune above almost every single human being on the planet to have constant access to a computer. And also looking at time commitment, right? So he was spending like literally every waking hour learning the computer. And it looks at many extremely successful top performers and says, hey, how do these people, look at all the time they're putting in and how it literally is just grind and go. And they go so hard on their passions that they move on to this complete new level of success in the marketplace where they can absolutely crush it because they've put in well over 10,000 hours into their work. And he goes over that concept and the individuals who have used it. And then he talks about how Gates went into high school and was able to land an internship job at information technology security at some really freaking cool coding company, and in exchange for his work he was able to use a computer for hours and hours a day and continue to work towards that background in the space of computer science and information technology, where he was absolutely crushing it because he had the ability and the drive and the perseverance to go and continue working with what he does. And a lot of people see it and they're like, drops out of Harvard. It was really challenging for him in the beginning, but he had to overcome all these big obstacles, and he had to have such a massive background of work and dedication that got him exactly where it was. And there are so many cool stories where it's like he wouldn't have been there if he was born a couple years earlier or a couple years later, or if he didn't go to that specific high school. And he, Malcolm Gladwell, he breaks down a lot of really freaking crazy life stories. Another one just off the top of my head, as soon as this plane goes, he was looking at hockey players and other sports too, but he started off with hockey, and he looked at the professional league hockey players and where their birthdays were, and it was so freaking crazy. 80%, if not more, of the players on professional teams, they had their birthdays in the first 3 months of the year. And you say, well, why is that? He goes through and he systematically breaks down what's going on here, and it turns out because the cutoff date for hockey, I think it was in Canada, or it might have been the American League, whatever it was December 31st. So the people that were born on December 31st or before, they would be put in a league, and then the people born after that in January, February, they would be significantly older, and they would go in to the previous year's league, right? So they would have the most growth throughout the year of everybody in the league because their birthday was the earliest it could possibly be month-wise. They were growing at a more exponential, they were ahead of everybody on the growth curve because since the cutoff was a very specific date at the beginning of the year, that means that everyone that was born earlier in the year got into the younger group, and they were more physically developed as men, right? So they had better skills. So at a very early age, they were outperforming their peer group, and they were getting much better and attention-focused coaching from their coaches. So they perform better at a very early age, like 6 to 8, just because of that growth spurt, and that inspired them personally and their coach to coach them more, to stick more on the field, and to put in that 10,000 hours or keep going really hard into what they're doing. Just because of their birthday, that systematically led to a complete and unfair bias towards these early birthday months in the professional league because they're getting more attention and training from the coach since they are the better performers on the team at the beginning, and because they're getting more attention at the beginning, they get more training, which means they just compound, they just go and get better and better and better than everybody else because everyone else is sitting out while they're playing in every single game, and the people that are getting the experience in every single game are systematically, they're not systematic, but like they're getting the work in and they're getting all of the mentorship from their teachers and coaches and the experience actually applying what they're doing. So they actually were so much better as they grew up because they got so much more attention from the coaches, because just at the beginning they were just a little bit better, and that little bit grew and grew and grew. And there are so many amazing, really cool things. He goes through so much stuff in here, it's absolutely insane, and it really made me rethink my background and the backgrounds of many people around me and how people get to where they are based off of their background. He even at the end, he goes through his own life and he's like, the only reason I'm here is because of this really crazy thing that happened with my family, where my mom was born right after some revolution in Africa where they were working towards education, and she graduated school just at the perfect time to get this scholarship to go to Europe, where if she was born 2 years later or 2 years earlier, it just wouldn't happen because there wasn't a revolution. And then that led to her at school, and that led to her marriage of a professor or someone she was working with, and that led to the family, and it was like, oh my God, right? Because like some of the biggest takeaways from it are like a lot of and it was weird because it's like a lot of the things you do, it's like determination, just keep pushing, keep going, and you're gonna crush it if you have that end in mind and you know exactly where you wanna be. But another really big thing that this really kind of opened my mind to is like, what's your background, where are you from? And then thinking about, how does that align with where I wanna be? And how has that influenced where I wanna be? What is the opportunities I've had by no chance but luck in my life so far that have taken me to where I am today? And thinking about like, what are these very, very specific, and like there are so many advantages he goes through of these top performers that just had random opportunities all of a sudden, right? Like who comes to you in junior year of high school or sophomore year of high school and says, hey, you want to code at our company? Like, Bill Gates, he was specifically picked out for that job just because he had experience. And the only reason he had experience was because he had that middle school, I think it was like private, where he had that computer access and he was able to pay for it because of the wealthier community is. It was really some just crazy stuff, and there are so many profound lives that have been impacted by that way. And he walks through all of these extremely famous people and says, look, you can do this too. Think about where you're from, think about where you want to be, and look at the opportunities that you've had and apply those in the marketplace, apply those professionally, apply those personally to build an extremely strong, self-dedicated path where all of a sudden you're using all of these strengths and you're using your background to your advantage very intelligently. Instead of just going towards whatever it is, you're really thinking about, what is it that I have a background in, what do I want to do, how can we align those, how can we make it work? And like some of the stories in here are like straight crazy. Like there are, definitely tons of careers, but like there is just some, like University of Michigan, there were some of these students where, one of them, he just couldn't for the life of him get a break at school. He had a terrible educational uprising, and he just wanted to learn so bad, and he went from a very poor background, so it was very difficult for him to get where he wanted to be because of his background, and a lack of social skill development just because of lack of resources, and he was unable time after time to get into top or just any universities and study and work, which was all he wanted to do, was learn about chemistry and math and how to build things, and that was the single most thing he wanted. But because of his background, he was systematically, and he goes into it in way more depth about like how this person's life journey developed, and they were just unable to achieve what they wanted. And at the same time, he goes and then he looks at the person who started the Manhattan, or not started it, but like the lead scientist on the Manhattan Project, and how this person was just like this other person who couldn't even get couldn't get schooling worked out, but he like literally punched people, threatened to kill people in school, and all of a sudden he had these better social skills where he was able to talk his way out of situations and had a surreal impact with the work he did, and even though the work he did wasn't specifically related to like nuclear development, he had some profoundly random contact in DC, and they called him out one day and said, hey, do you want to start this project, do you want to lead this project, even though he had such a essentially worse background than this other scientist guy who was working very hard every single day just to get to where he wanted to be. And it was a little bit like, dude, like, do you have control over this stuff? Because a lot of the stories are like these backgrounds determine their futures, determine their lives. And it was so crazy to see that, because it's like, it really makes you think about the aspect of the level of control you have over yourself and your goals and your mentalities. And it was just a total mindset change where it's like, you can take yourself to the next level and absolutely crush it. Like, when I even consider thinking about who would want to read this book, it's so insane, because like, if you're a top performer, you're a high performer, you're outperforming, if you want to crush it in any field you're in, like, this is the book. Like, this man, because like he was like the leader of the Manhattan Project, he went off and he crushed it just because he had this very unique background, and he breaks it down in such a great way. And if you want to take your past and your history and apply that to the future and have profound results professionally and personally, where you're really crushing it in the marketplace because you understand exactly how to bring value and where your value adder is in your life, this is like the book to take whatever you're doing to that next level. And also to understand how uber successful mostly Americans, but individuals have gone from nothing to work, grind, and there's just so much in this book. I wish I could cover it all in this video. It's killer stuff, and I hope you guys check it out. I'll leave a link below on Amazon. It's crazy. Thanks guys, have a good one. Bye bye.